Okay, good to go.
Thank you
All
so
right, no
much.
problem. No, thank you for showing me. Now I know.
Conference International Airport Convention for the month of September at 5:30 p.m. Like the Steel Journal, we did the everybody here. Good idea.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And you call and you what's the agenda?
Yes, the agenda has been posted.
Roll.
Commissioner Adams,
Present.
Behrman. Behrman. Behrman is excused. Burke,
Present.
Caldwell,
Present.
Corcoran,
Present.
Donna,
Here.
Delgado is absent. Feltman,
Here.
Long, Hughes is excused. Martin,
Here.
Michaelis,
Here.
Park is excused. Hyde, here. Swear,
Here.
Wise, Wiseman is excused. And yeah,
Present.
thank you, we have a form.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to accept the agenda, please. Move that. You have a motion. A second. Thank you. All in.
We'll take a roll call vote. Thank you. Adams,
Accept. Yes.
Behrman, Behrman is excused. Burke,
Yes.
Caldwell,
Yes.
Corcoran,
Yes.
Donna,
Here.
Delgado, is absent. Feltman,
Yes.
Long,
Aye.
Martin,
Yes.
Michaelis,
Yes.
Hyde,
Yes.
Swear,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to see if we have any public comments for 3 minutes regarding this.
We have no scheduled public comments for this evening. We'll give it a moment to see if anyone in the public wishes to speak in public comments this evening. No one wishes to speak here in the room. Anyone on Zoom who wishes to speak in public comments tonight? Please raise your Zoom hand if you wish to speak in public comments. We have no public speakers this evening.
Thank you. I'd like to close public comments at this time and to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April.
So moved.
You have a motion?
Second.
Second. Christina, roll call.
Adams,
Yes.
Burke,
Yes.
Caldwell,
Abstain. Yes, I was. Remember.
Corcoran,
Abstain.
Donna,
Here.
Long,
Abstain.
Michaelis,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Martin, I just skipped you, sorry.
Abstain.
Michaelis was yes. Hyde,
Yes.
Swear,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Young.
Yeah.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce, we have 2 new commissioners. Tracy Martin from Palm Springs, and would like to see Tracy give us a brief couple of minutes, your background.
Sure, you have to. Hi, everybody, Tracy Martin. My family and I moved to Palm Springs about 6 years ago. We lived in Messina, just across the tarmac over there. We moved to the Bay Area where I had a career in technology and media and corporate credit. So the last 20 years, I was a CFO in various small and mid-sized companies. I am retired now, and I asked to be part of the commission because I thought I could use my corporate finance and strategy and operations experience to help better the airport. I also, as a neighbor in the airport, want to make sure that the airport is as good a neighbor as it possibly can be. And so I look forward to working with you all to make sure that happens well.
Thank you, Tracy, and we are honored that you'll be joining us and serving demonstrators. We also have, there's a new boss.
Actually, Sonia's husband will not be joining us this evening.
We have a new, which is Christina's assistant.
Actually,
So,
she's not gonna be joining any of the airport commission meetings for now or the future.
she's going on by from them.
No, she's no longer with the airport.
Got it. Any discussion and action item? Airport master plan update.
Thank you, Chair Dada. I think that's me, and I believe that Ryan Hayes is on the line. Yesterday, the airport, along with the Meet Hunt team and the working group for the master plan, had a public open house to discuss the initial alternatives for terminal and landside development for the master plan. So we wanted to take an opportunity to have a discussion about that in the room today. To go over some of those alternatives really briefly, make sure that the full commission was up to speed, and then go over a little bit of process. So I'll turn it over to Ryan so that you can go through the alternatives, and then we'll talk about process after he presents the alternatives. Ryan?
Thank you, Harry. Harry, can you and Christina hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm in an airport, so if there's some background noise, I apologize. Good evening, everyone. Can you also see the screen, Harry?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe I can make it a little bigger.
That's good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, as Harry said, we had a great meeting yesterday. We had, I don't know if we've counted the attendees, but we had at least 200 members of the community show up to hear about the master plan. So that was great. I'm going to go through the slides that we shared with them, which were the same information that we included on the boards at the public open house, starting with this process slide. So the master plan takes place in 4 kind of pillars: the pre-planning pillar, the investigation pillar. Those two pillars have been mostly completed. We're moving into the solutions phase, as Harry said, starting to develop alternatives. And then the fourth pillar is the implementation phase, when we do the financial planning, figure out how to pay for all of the projects, as well as the ALP and the CEQA process. So the master plan schedule, as a reminder, is approximately 12 months. So we're expecting to be substantially complete in about March of next year. And at that point, we plan to be at draft report stage, and that's when we start the environmental analysis in accordance with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. We're also planning another public open house at that time in March. We did a lot of, I think all of you know, but we've done a lot of outreach on this project, both to the community as well as to stakeholders, particularly related to the terminal, the airlines, the car rentals, the TSA, the concessionaires, everyone who has to go to work in this building on a daily basis, we wanted to know what they like about the terminal, what they don't like. Some of those likes are included on the right side of this slide. Obviously, the quaintness, the charm, the mountain views, the very unique indoor outdoor hybrid space of the terminal. So we wanted to make sure we included all that input, and so those are some planning considerations that have gone into the development of these alternatives. We shared a bit of a history, a timeline with the community. I won't go through each of these items, but the important thing is that we're dealing with a 1960s design terminal that is a great building and very important to the community and has historic significance, but also has some functional challenges. So that's one of our mandates for this master plan, is to make the terminal enhance the passenger experience and enhance the flow of passengers through the terminal. I'll also note on this slide that major improvements at this airport have often followed a master plan process. So the runway extension is an example. The air traffic control tower is an example of major projects that have followed a planning process. This slide we shared with the community just to orient them to the terminal area, our study area for the terminal, which is essentially the terminal building, the Bono concourse, the regional jet concourse, and all of the gates that surround those concourses. The gates are shown on the right. There's approximately 18 gates at the airport, and we're anticipating that to need to increase to 32 gates by the end of the planning period. So the previous master plan recommended no additional gates. So it's important for you all as commissioners to know that the airport layout plan does not include a plan to add gates. If the airport wanted to add gates today, there's no plan on where those gates would go. This slide breaks down the spaces in the terminal, and a lot of detail, but the important thing is there are certain spaces in the terminal that are eligible for FAA participation. There are spaces that are leasable and the FAA will not participate in the funding of, and so that's important moving forward into our alternatives. I think everyone on the commission obviously knows the amount of growth that the airport's been experiencing. It's historic. 2022 was the busiest year at the Palm Springs Airport. 1.5 million enplanements, which are shown on the left side of this chart. An enplanement is one passenger boarding one flight. So to get to total passengers that the terminal handles, you have to double the enplanement. So essentially what that means is the airport processed 3 million total passengers in calendar year 2022. And on the right side of this chart, we're indicating growth to approximately 6 million total passengers by the end of the planning period. The last chart at the bottom right of this slide shows the time of day, the hours of day, and when the peaks hit, when all the airlines schedule their flights. And at Palm Springs, it's around the noon hour, so the middle of the day during the peak season is when there's approximately 17 aircraft on the ground at one time. So essentially every gate is used during that peak period. This next slide is just talks about level of service, the concept of level of service. Obviously, we want to provide a terminal that is optimum, has an optimum amount of space. We want to reduce the queuing time for passengers and provide an optimum level of space. We don't want to under provide space. We don't want to over design. So we're trying to strike a balance essentially in our recommendations for how large the terminal expansion should be. And then this is just a summary slide of all of the spaces and how we project them to need to grow. The first column on this slide shows that the airport terminal is about 300,000 existing square feet. We need that to grow to similar to the number of enplanements doubling. We need the number of square feet in the future terminal to double to handle the 20-year projected growth. Obviously, we looked at parking as well. This is a graph on the right that shows parking demand by month during a 6-month period. You can see the spikes in December. We don't design parking spaces for the spikes for the peak. We design for the busiest day of the or the average day of the peak month, which is actually March. Our parking projections show that we need to go from 1,700 spaces on the public side to 2,700 spaces, 2,300 rental car spaces growing to 3,700, and then we also need to plan for increases in employee spaces. We take all of that information, as you all know, and we've developed some terminal renovation and expansion alternatives. So we looked with our teaming partner Gensler, we looked at 3 different approaches. The first approach being maximum reuse. So essentially we reuse the Wexler terminal or head house and also the Bono concourse, but repurpose the regional concourse in approach 1. In approach 2, we essentially don't utilize either of the concourses and we rebuild the concourses entirely. And then in approach 3, we do not tear down the Wexler terminal, we repurpose it for another use, and we completely replace terminal facilities on the south side of the terminal envelope. So what those look like, and these are the drawings that we shared with the community last night. The first one being the alternative 1A, which is the, I can't remember what the title is, pier expansion. So the Bono concourse stays the same. We add gates to the north. This orange rectangle would be at least a 2-level, potentially more level, consolidated rental car parking structure. Surface parking is basically what's existing today and shown in yellow. And then there would be a pier. We would replace the regional jet concourse with a standard pier jet bridge loaded concourse and alternative 1A. Alternative 1B, very similar to 1A in that we maintain the Bono concourse, but we develop an extension of the Bono concourse to provide more gates, as well as similar to 1A, additional gates to the north, Conrack to the north, and additional gates to the south. Then moving a little bit away from alternative 1 and alternative 2, essentially the only facility that's maintained is the Wexler terminal. And then the concourse layout is completely reimagined in this alternative. But again, similar to alternative 1A and 1B, the Conrack is to the north. I should note in all 3 of these, the FIS or the Federal Inspection Facility to process potential for international flights is also located adjacent to the Conrack to the north in all 3 of these. And then you can just see that we develop a concourse layout that's a little bit different, but one of the benefits of this alternative is the courtyard spaces could potentially be expanded. And then the third alternative obviously is the most radical change, or would be the most radical change. This alternative illustrates all of the terminal facilities replaced along to the south. A three pier concourse. The parking deck, the rental car consolidated parking deck is illustrated in the current parking configuration, current surface parking lot in this alternative. And it has less expansion to the north in alternative 3. So what these all look like in comparison is on this final chart that we shared with the community. We did ask the community to share their input on all of these and share their preferences. And we haven't reviewed all that information yet, but we handed out hard copy comment forms, and we also asked folks to go to the website and submit comments. So we have comments coming in through the website and hard copy comments that we still have to sift through from the meeting last night. So I know that was a quick presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Were there any questions for Ryan?
Yeah, it's a specific question about TSA, the location in the process. I can't read that quite close now. The TSA would still be processing in the center as it currently is, or could it be relocated? So,
I believe in all of these alternatives, the idea is that it would either remain in the Wexler building or in the southern extension to the Wexler building. And most likely the southern extension. Part of the challenge that we're having right now is that we don't have enough space for queuing with the checkpoint.
that's my main reason for the question.
Yeah.
Between 1A, 1B2, and 3, how many gates would we be adding based on each of those configurations?
So each of these configurations takes us up to 31 gates over time. Obviously, we wouldn't build those all at once, but in phases, it would eventually result in 31 gates.
All of these would give us 31.
Correct.
So.
I think it's actually 32, Harry, is the total number.
Sorry, 36. Let's go.
So these master plan people that do these things, are they estimates pretty on track? They've been doing it for a while now,
So
for different airports and stuff.
are you talking about our specific aeronautical forecast?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
We
32
believe,
gates, is that a pretty good estimate?
we believe that that's based on the data, based on the analysis they've done. We believe that's a pretty good guess, pretty good estimate. Of course, you never know what happens over the next 20 years.
Right.
Things could change, but we think that's going to be pretty accurate. The other thing that Ryan hadn't mentioned is that the FAA just signed off on that this week. So they're projecting and they have approved a forecast of 6 million passengers.
In the first phase of the working group, when the long range plan was all about forecasts. And so through the analysis that the consultants have done, they estimate that over 20 years we'll double the number of enplanements coming here. But that doesn't mean we'll double the number of flights, because we anticipate they've advised, I guess the airlines as well, that they'll get rid of all the regional jets and replace them with 737s or larger jets. So the 32 gates is really based on that forecast of 20 years from now, doubling the number of enplanements, but with larger aircraft. So twice as many people, but not necessarily twice as many flights. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So these plans here, I guess it's for, whatever. So we do this, this is for a 20-year projection, but in another 7, 8 to 10 years, we're gonna do another master plan. Do these allow for future growth, or is this gonna be a?
Are you asking if this is static? No, and that's the reason we do master plans every 7 to 10 years, because things do change with the economy, with the business environment, et cetera. So we can get halfway down this pathway.
Right. 8 years from now, we're not gonna say, oh, we have to build a brand new terminal. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Do any of the plans increase the number of runways?
We have not gotten to the air side part of this yet. So that's phase 2 of the master planning process. But I can tell you now, there isn't a need to add runways at the moment.
With double the gates?
Even with double the gates, so we're not even near utilizing what the runway can hold in capacity.
I'm sorry to. What is the annual growth projected per year for employers that they're using?
Ryan, do you have that slide with you?
The forecast slide?
Yes. I'm looking for the chart. Okay, so I can barely see that, but maybe Ryan can speak to year-over-year growth in terms of percentage.
I don't recall it right off the top of my head, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4% compound annual growth over the 20 years.
Okay.
Which is similar to what you've experienced on the historic chart on the left. If you average that out, it's probably between 3 and 5% average annual growth.
Do all the plans, I know they have the same number of estimated gates eventually, do they all allow for the same size aircraft? Sort of maximum size aircraft?
So we are planning for our critical demand aircraft for this airport. So the FAA categorizes aircraft based on its size, its wingspan, and its speed. For us, that's going to continue to pretty much remain the same. However, we did account for the potential for international service. So I believe 2 of those gates, if I'm not mistaken, can accommodate wide body aircraft. Thank you.
That's correct, Terry.
So
Brian, as you go from approach or the first through the fourth, the cost changes as well. Can you just give the commission a sense of what the forecast cost would be between the 4 options?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So we have not done the cost estimates yet, but common sense tells us that the more we reuse facilities versus replace them, alternative 1A is likely to come in cheaper than alternative 3, just as an overall example. That is one of the next steps of the planning process, is to refine these alternatives and start determining the phases in which we might build these and put a cost estimate to each phase. So that I don't have the cost estimate information today, but that is something that we will come back to you with at a future meeting.
But I think it's safe to share that the approach 3, basically a complete rebuild, would be the most expensive of all the options.
Yes, absolutely.
how does the financing work? Is this something that the FAA 100% or does the city council today for it? Is there a regional?
That's a great question.
That's a really good question, and Ryan can probably speak a little more to this, but in general, what will happen is once we hone in on an alternative, we'll start to go through the process of financial planning for that. And that could involve airport revenues, could involve grants, could involve private equity. There are a number of avenues we could leverage for that. We typically don't rely on tax dollars. I think the city would be resistant to that. Chris is in the room and he'd probably say, heck no. But we would find a way to make that work and phase that so that we're able to accommodate that in terms of finances. Ryan, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that's all exactly right, Harry. And we are likely going to have to look at multiple sources of funds to meet the requirements of what this is all going to cost. But we will leave no stone unturned to look at every possible funding source.
So last night on the news, they said that a recommendation would be sent to city council in November. Is that true?
That is, well, we're going to talk next step. So I don't know if Ryan, if you want to touch on that or if you want me to take that.
Yeah, what we need is an agreement from the city that one of these concepts makes the most sense. There's a lot of tie into the airfield planning that Harry mentioned we're still going to need to do as the second half of this master plan. And we need to know what the terminal concept is going to be. It doesn't mean that it absolutely has to be built like this, but we need a big picture idea of what the long-term plan is going to be for the terminal so that we can do the rest of the plan the rest of the airport to fit with that terminal, if that makes sense.
So when we're talking process, I think what I envision, and this may or may not actually happen, but what I envision is right now, Mead and Hunt and Aviatrix are going to take the comments from the meeting last night, synthesize those, go through them, figure out, which are critical. We'll address those comments, see if there's anything else we need to incorporate into these alternatives. We'll eventually take this back to the working group, and the working group will assess those comments. And then, just based on some pure leg work, we'll narrow down a preferred alternative that we bring back to the full commission for consideration. And then the full commission would make that recommendation to the city council.
Just a question, which of these approaches is the least intrusive to airport and airline operation and also the passenger flow? Which of these?
I could not, yeah, that's really hard to say based on the designs. I mean, some of these things, if you're adding on to the existing facility, that in itself is an impact operationally. A new facility can be an impact, but in different ways, right? Some may affect passengers more, some may affect aircraft operations more. We have an environmental process with all of them, and that can be pretty involved, so it just kind of depends on.
But my understanding, approach 3, this terminal can still function as we do today, well, that's built, so is that an advantage?
It would really come down to the phasing, so I'm not a phasing expert at all on construction. And that would come down to the phasing of that.
Harry, if I could jump in, that is a next step in the process, is to figure out that phasing and figure out how we minimize the impact to the passengers during construction. How do we build this and keep the airport open and operational at the same time? So that is absolutely a challenge. It's a great question, and it is something that the master plan is going to try to help the airport figure out.
To what degree can we look to FAA or the airport layout planning approval, DOT? Can we rely on any of this from money from the federal government?
Yeah, so there are 2 components to the master planning process that are approved by the FAA. So I mentioned one earlier, which was the aviation forecast. That's already been approved. What happens is once we determine our preferred alternative, both for the air side and the land side, so this alternative as well as whatever happens on the airfield, Brian's team puts that into an airport layout plan that also has to be approved by the FAA. And what that document does is, once approved, it's somewhat their commitment to help fund that capital development.
Okay, so there will be some contribution once the airport layout plan is approved by them.
Correct.
Is there very general guidance around the usable life of reuse facilities versus new? I mean, does history suggest that reuse facilities have a 20-year lifespan and new facilities have a 50-year lifespan? I'm not making that numbers, obviously, but are there models that help us understand that question?
That's a really good question. I don't have the answer to that. Ryan, do you?
I do. One of the components of this master plan is we had our building engineers basically tour and inspect the Wexler terminal as well as the concourses and do basically a systems analysis and determine what systems can be added onto, what systems can be expanded and upgraded. Obviously, the systems are pretty dated in the Wexler terminal. What we're probably, and we're still working, this will be potentially an appendix report to the master plan, this systems analysis. But we're looking at the useful life of the building and the useful life structurally, as well as the useful life of the building from a mechanical and HVAC and systems standpoint. And we're going to make recommendations. Whatever alternative is selected, we will make recommendations for new HVAC, new systems, new electrical, whatever's needed.
Christina, I know in the back of our packet, we have the subcommittee assignments. Can you just review who's on the working committee for this for a second? Because I don't have my list.
I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say it's you and Othman, Kevin Wiseman, and former Commissioner Ken Hedrick.
Okay. All right. So we're the commissioners who are working with the planning group and also with the commission, with the consultants. And so we meet periodically as we move through each of these phases. And then part of the responsibility is to report back any big ahas that come out of those meetings. So this kind of catches you, for those of you who are new, catches you up to speed, both in terms of the forecast as well as what these options are. And as this process unfolds, we'll continue to provide feedback in our monthly meetings, so you know what's going on. Anything else? Any other questions?
All right.
Just a comment. I thought last night went great. And I know some of you wanted to come and there were some concerns. We can't all be in the same room because it creates a forum and we can start to change the world. So just to build on Harry's comments, I think we had a great turnout. I think Ryan, you and the team did a great job. And we were just chatting earlier. I think the reaction is really positive. I noticed, I watched the body language during some of the presentations. Some people are kind of nodding their heads, especially around probably the number of additional flights, things like that. They have noise implications. We talked about that one-on-one with people after the presentation. But I think it was a great first shot. I know that future presentations and each of these phases will have future public presentations. Probably will include some Q&A, and maybe that will be a little bit more interesting to just see when people have a strong opinion about where we land on these things. But I thought it was a great first job. Really nice work.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, anything else? All right, should we move on to marketing?
So, Ryan, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks,
Yeah.
team.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
The marketing and air service update was provided in the agenda. Daniel is not with us this evening. Did anyone have any questions on the marketing and air service update?
Okay, he'll be back in our next meeting, so we'll jump into this. Measure J.
I'll actually go ahead and take that one. But before I start talking about Measure J, I just wanted to do a really quick introduction to Christopher Mooney. He is the City of Palm Springs Finance Director. So you may or may not see him here at the meetings, but he is always aware of what's happening with our financials. We work really close together. So this is Chris Mooney.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
In addition to that, Chris actually also reports updates to the Measure J committee. And so we are actually working together, and we tonight are going to be presenting, at least the airport is presenting to the commission for a vote on how we want to utilize our Measure J funds that we have. So actually, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what Measure J funds are?
Sure. So I'll try to be brief. Back in 2017, the FAA passed a rule that said any local tax that was put in place after, I want to say 2008, is any local tax on aviation fuel has to be set aside for airport capital projects, airport operations, really anything airport related. So Measure J sales tax in the city of Palm Springs was put in place in 2012. And so it's subject to the tax on aviation fuel to be set aside for airports. So when this rule was put in place in 2017, the Measure J Commission at that time began to set aside $200,000 a year. It was just an estimated amount for airport projects, airport operations. Since that time, it's grown to be now $1.3 million. It is just an estimate. At some point in time, we'll go back and try to do some analysis about if that's the right amount, if there's more money there, is there less money there? We'll do that analysis probably with the airport team. But we'll put a price. So back then, we had to respond back to the FAA at what our process was to be sure to set aside that money. And back at that time, with the finance director and their team, the process was it was 2 aviation fuelers on site. And what they would do at that time is at the end of every month, they would calculate how much fuel cost there was and how much tax would apply to that fuel. And they would set those funds aside that particular month, and they would just continue to grow. That was the methodology that we told the FAA that we were going to do.
Well, somewhere in the turnover, since 2017, there's been quite a bit. That process was, lost, and we just started to set aside $200,000 a year. So that's why we need to go back and abide by this process that we told the FAA, or amend the process with the FAA and approve it, to something that may be more applicable today. But all that being said, I have $1.3 million. We're going to continue to set aside $200,000 a year until we come up with a process. But for now, we're going to say that money is set aside for airport projects, and have given the airport team to go ahead to apply projects to that $1.3 million. I think that's what we're going to do today.
Chris, do you think we're over or under?
You know, I have no idea. I really don't. I really don't. I will say this. There's also probably Measure D money available to the airport, which is a half-cent sales tax that was passed in 2018. So it is not, it's used for general provisions. So we can, I think, apply the same principle to the Measure D tax as we have been doing the Measure J tax. The only thing about the Measure D tax is nothing's been set aside since 2018. So when we do our analysis, we'll go back and look. But that's got to come from the general fund, because that's where the Measure D money goes. I have no idea how much that is either. So if it's 500,000-600,000 or something like that.
So, sorry. So if you do your analysis, find out that we should have only been getting 190 instead of 200, do we gotta back pay them?
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I don't anticipate that happening, especially since Measure D, we haven't pulled any money from there. So if we find out we are under on the Measure J side and over on the Measure D side, I think that'll compensate. So Measure J again is unrestricted money, so it can be used for general purposes.
So this always concerns me that we have this found money, right? And then it goes into general services. And I'm not sure what happens. I mean, we've been asking, we're just talking among ourselves about how we can deploy some new funds, perhaps some of the advertising revenue, to really focus on projects to improve the customer experience. Now, this is not a windfall, but somewhat of that, right? And I want to know how we get from these income sources, new income sources, to talk about specific applications of those funds. Now, you know, Measure J was passed to help us finish downtown and to really enhance the infrastructure of the city. So I would argue that these funds to support the customer experience at the airport would be a proper application of the funds. But I know some of the advertising revenues we're talking about, some of the sponsorship revenues we're talking about, how do we get to bring some great ideas to the commission about how we spend this money vis-a-vis, it goes to the general fund and then it winds up in some of your reports and it goes wherever it goes after that. I mean, is there an opportunity with all of these new sources of revenue to really bring us some great ideas and to do some things that would really move the dial on customer experience?
So I think that's what we're going to try and do with Measure J tonight. We have some proposals that we would like the commission to consider in terms of projects. These are already projects that are currently existing on the books. However, if there's something that the commission would like to look at aside from these projects, we can certainly have the discussion about that. As far as the advertising funds, but can I say one other thing about the process? And I left this out, but it's very important, is that there's two pieces to the approval, actually three pieces to the approval process. The airport commission approves it. The Measure J commission also has to approve it. And then it gets referred to the city council for final approval.
Yeah.
So it is a process to get it done. And the airport commission and the Measure J commission really have to kind of be, I mean, I know we're going to hear some tonight. And then if we approve something tonight, I'll take it to the Measure J commission in October. And then we'll see what happens after that. But, you know, but that's the process.
Got it.
So real quick, so there's no concern of we don't use, we lose the funds?
No, you won't use the funds. The funds are officially restricted for airport use.
But it's a windfall. There's no doubt about it. You know, this is found money. So Are you gonna tell us what some of those ideas are tonight,
I
or?
think Victoria's gonna go with that.
Let's go. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah,
Let's
go
do
for it. So, all right, so, like Chris Mooney said, we have $1.3 million in Measure J funds. We have 4 proposed projects that we are, bringing before the commission tonight. The first project is the airport share. So we're primarily looking at that very far right column. That's the airport share of what we have to pay for. So our baggage claim, design and construction, you see that the project costs about $32 million. We have a lot of federal funds that are coming into us, but our airport share as a part of those grants is about $1.5 million. So with using the Measure J, if we select that, then that would be able to cover the airport share. There's also the baggage handling system design, which is about 1.7 million. So obviously it's not going to be the full amount, but it's going to be some of it. There's elevators that that have actually reached their useful life, and so we need to replace them. That's including cargo elevators as well as what the passengers use in the Bono concourse, as well as, I'm sorry, this is just Bono concourse and anything that's related to passenger use. And then lastly is the aircraft rescue and firefighting truck, which is about $1.2 million. So those 4 are the projects that are before us today, and we would like to see what you think that we should use the Measure J funds on.
Am I correct to recall we have 4 fire trucks now, 1 new and 3 older ones?
We currently have 2 brand new ones, and then we have 3.
We have 2 and 2, 2 new ones, 2 old ones. Nice. Yeah.
So we would be retiring one of the older ones for this one here.
So all of these projects are however slated to occur, whether or not J funds are applied.
That's correct. That's correct. But it's still going to be some portion of money that's going to come out of the airport share. And I'm sorry, I completely skipped over the elevators. Our share is $235,000. So it's not a very large share of it because we're getting a lot of federal funds for that one.
And you say baggage claim number 1. Is that the outgoing or the incoming baggage?
That's the incoming.
Incoming.
Mhm.
What's our timing on that?
We are in design for that right now. Design, and Jeremy might have to correct me on this, but we should be near 100% design right around the January or February timeframe. Because we did this under a construction manager at risk contract, we're looking at turning dirt in the summer of next year.
In completion forecast?
We don't have that schedule yet. Oh boy, yeah, probably another year and a half worth of construction.
And will that be incorporated into the new designs of the? Or that kind of use it until we're doing something else and throw it away?
A little bit of both. So the short answer to that is both for the outbound and inbound baggage systems, those firms have been working with Mead and Hunt to make sure that we're not having a lot of sunk costs, right? So we're gonna try and coordinate these activities so that we get our best bang for our buck.
Any commissioners on Zoom that would like to ask a question?
Todd, if you're still online.
I am.
From the marketing perspective, where your subcommittee has done a lot of discussions around the overall customer experience stuff. Are there other things that have come up in your subcommittee that would be either faster in terms of something that would have a quicker impact on customer experience, or ideas that you have had perhaps out of the concessions discussion? Anything else we could do to use these funds that would have a more direct impact? So I look at the list, obviously baggage claim seems to be the one that would have the greatest impact on the customer, but we're 2 years away from that. Are there any other things coming out of your subcommittee that we should think about?
You know, I'm not certain that anything has necessarily come out of that. You know, I'm somebody that looks at things through a PR lens as well. It's really easy to say your Measure J funds went to this as you look at a new ARF. right? The things that you actually can see. But beyond that, Kevin, off the top of my head, there's nothing else that's coming to mind. I'll give it some more thought, pop in if I need to with more.
Other comments, other thoughts?
Does the allocation of the J funds change the timeline of any of these things?
No.
Is it easier for the J committee that has to approve it to have one thing to take, say, we want a new fire truck, rather than we're gonna spend 100,000 on this and 100,000?
Yeah, in my opinion, I do think that one project taken to commission would be desirable. That way you're because you're just to the airport commission and you know what probably the needs are, and somebody may present that.
And do you think we should spend the whole 1.3, or should we keep a little bit in the fund?
Well, you're going to get 200,000 each year, so you'll have money each year.
Unless we all want.
Yeah. Right.
Plus funds from the other tax as well.
Right, exactly.
So we could take no action today and we could still have the funds sitting in an account, we still get interest on those funds. So that could be something that we can defer to a later time. It's also an option.
Do we have a need for the fire truck sooner than later?
Yes, it's on over now.
It actually was approved, the purchase order, the fire truck was approved, I think it was in June. We took it to city council, council approved it too.
They've already passed that.
When you work the numbers, how else would that be paid for normally?
Out of the airport account, just our local cash.
Is there anything else in your wish list?
We have a very long wish list.
We do.
Should we look at that before we decide? I mean, if I look at the list now and there has to be one choice, it would be baggage claim and keep that project moving. My only concern, and it's not really a concern, is we have to get that done. Is it's a 2-year payout, it's a 2-year wait. So I think 2 years from now, we'll all be proud of it, but is there something else that's on the wish list? You know, these things are all funded, right? So I get we're covering the airport share in some of this, but are there other things on the wish list that would have a more immediate impact? And you know, the Measure J folks are going to care about, you know, how this aligns with the intent of Measure J funds. All right, so doing the baggage claim, when that's really a capital project, you know, if I were a commissioner there, I would say, wait a minute, you know, is this really in the spirit of what Measure J funds were created for? So again, are there other things on the wish list that would have a more immediate impact and perhaps align a little closer to the vision of Measure J funds?
There's very little on our wish list that we are going to be able to turn over within the next 12 months that would have a more immediate impact other than the ARC truck. Now, that said, are there opportunities for things like landscape conversion or sustainability projects or things like that? Absolutely, we can add those if we'd like. I think some of those are already on the capital list that we can explore, and we may be able to accelerate those projects.
So let me make a proposal. And Todd, I think you and the subcommittee, it'd be great to get you guys involved. Before we make a call, can we just take a beat for another month and let's see what other proposals we may bring forward, both on your wish list and maybe give the commissioners a chance to think about other things we could use this money for before we make the call.
I have no problem with that. You can absolutely do that.
Especially since this is already funded.
These are all funded.
So maybe there's something we really like that's not funded that would fall into this category.
Yeah, we use, for those of you who are new, the shade structures have always been a discussion here as an example of something that would improve people's experience here. And we always said, okay, that's an example of something that has a direct impact on our passenger experience. It's an idea like that we could then take to Measure J and say, this is going to have an immediate impact. Now, we have the concessions coming on board in the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months. And, you know, that's going to have a big impact. But before we go ahead and put this to funds that are to projects that are already been funded, I think I'd like to just take a beat and see if there's other things that people could come up with, other ideas. And, you know, Ryan and his team, we said, what are the 5 coolest things that are being done at airports now? that are really having an impact on customer experience, to bring some of those ideas to us and say, okay, this is worth $1.3 million to give it a shot. Can we take that time? Is everybody okay with that?
I think since we've asked the commission to take a vote on this, we can, if someone would like to do so, they can make a motion to postpone to a future commission meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
I would need to take a roll call.
Oh, yeah, roll call, so go ahead.
So the motion is to postpone the meeting, so it's gonna be yes, no, or abstain, please. Adams,
Yes.
Burke,
Yeah, yes.
Caldwell,
Yes.
Corcoran,
Yes.
Feltman. Feltman, are you still with us? He's left the meeting. Fong,
Aye.
Martin,
Yes.
Michaelis,
Yes.
Hi,
Yes.
Swear,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Motion passes to postpone. Thank you.
Thank you all. And so just in terms of action steps, let's work with staff and we'll see between us, between commissioners, between the staff and also perhaps our consultants. If we can do a little research on what's kind of state of the art, what's happening, see if we can bring some ideas and we can revisit this at our next meeting. Fair enough?
Yes.
Chris, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm just fine with that, and if anybody wants to attend the Measure J meeting tomorrow night at 5:30 to see, get a sense of the projects that the Measure J Commission supports, we're gonna go over each one tomorrow night, so feel free.
Awesome.
The agenda is posted on city's website.
Great. Thanks for your patience on that. I appreciate it. Okay, financial summary.
All right, so this is just an unaudited financial summary for the year-to-date revenues, expenditures, and cash balance ending on August 31st, 2023. So Fund 405, since we do have some new commissioners, Fund 405 is the airport fund for customer facility charges. Customer facility revenue is collected by the car rental concessionaires and remitted to the airport according to state law to support the, potentially it could be used for a future consolidated rental car facility and or common use transportation. In March 2020, City Council approved a change in collection methodology from $10 per transaction to $9 per day up to 5 days maximum. So right now, the year-to-date revenues are about 3% of the budget and the budget of $9.1 million, which is a little bit of a decrease, about 3% when we compare that to prior year. And so you will notice that on our, when you look at our passenger counts, you will see there was also a decrease in passengers. So that's kind of attributed to that. It's affecting our car rentals, and you'll even notice that it affects our passenger facility charges. Currently, we do not have any expenditures for the CFC fund because we have no kind of expenses for planning for the consolidated rental car facility at the moment. So we haven't started any projects on that. We have a net balance of $255,000. So that's actually what you see on the screen here. The PFC revenue is a $4.50 charge, net $4.39 to the airport after a deduction of 11 cents for the airline processing fee. It's paid by each ticketed passenger that boards an airplane at the airport. There's actually a change to the financial reports. The budgeted operating revenue for Fund 410, it changed to approximately $6.4 million. It was just a link that I had linked incorrectly in there. So I just want the record to reflect the change. Fund 410 is our airport passenger facility charge. The year-to-date revenue is roughly 5% of the budget of $6.4 million, which is an increase of approximately, kind of crazy, 247%. But that is because when at the time that the financials were prepared, there was an accrual in there that and that threw it off. And so it was pretty much all of the revenues for the June 30th. They had to get moved out of this fiscal year and put back into prior fiscal year. So the actual amounts for August is about 85,000. So it's actually trucking as about around the same as last year. The airport doesn't have any expenditures for the POC. Right now we have in that expense account, what you'll see hit is our interest payable for our bonds, our 2019 bonds, which is payable semi-annually on June 1st and December 1st of each year. And then the principal is due in June. So those are about the timeframes of when you'll see expenses hit that account. And then there might be some other small expenses for contractual services for our PFC reporting and audit and so forth. So right now it shows that there's a surplus of 317,000, but that's actually definitely less because of that accrual of 232,000. Fund 415 tracks all of the revenues and expenditures for operating and maintaining the airport. So this is where all of our revenue comes into our non-aeronautical, our aeronautical, our grant revenue, all of that gets put in here, as well as all of our expenses to operate and maintain the airport. So you'll see that our revenues were up 9%. So we were at 3.7 million when compared to prior year. Our expenditures were actually down 9% when compared to prior year. We are still going through and transitioning out of one fiscal year and into another. So we're still continuously posting our requisitions for contracts that we are being awarded. So, and as work gets done or as we start working on other things, you'll start seeing those expenses increase over time. Fund 416 is our airport capital projects. So this is where you'll see all of our capital projects, such as our baggage claim, our master plan, anything that has to do with like our taxiway, runways. So you'll see all the expenses hit there. So these are really our large expenses that are going to hit this Fund 416 account. And so right now there's a net balance of $335,000. Pretty much our expenses exceeded our revenues, which it happens in this account here. We do, at the end of the year, we will do a transfer from Fund 415 into Fund 416. And we budget for that as well every year. So that's something that we allocate because we know what projects are happening. Some of the things that you'll see in there is, for instance, our master plan and even like our common use for, I don't know if anybody's flown out of the Bono lately, but we do have some construction going on in there where the gates are closed down. So we're converting those gates to common use. The next slide just talks about our cash. Fund 405, again, that's the customer facility charges. You see that is getting really beefed up. So we're doing really well there. We have about 38.6 million in cash. Our Fund 410 passenger facility charges about 2.5 million. And then our airport operation and maintenance unrestricted is about 32.5 million. And then our Fund 416, I can't see it and I can't see it on the screen, but it's about 5.4 if that's what I recall. So that concludes my financial presentation. Does anybody have any questions for me?
So we're doing well.
You're doing well. Yeah.
Any questions? We all good on Zoom? Thank you.
Please let me know if you want me to say that next time. We're doing well. I can avoid about 10 minutes. Like seriously, let me know.
That's why we're gonna spend the Measure J money. That's nothing else, because we're doing well. All right, any other questions? Let's do a concessions update. Tell us how we're doing.
I'm gonna pass that to Jeremy. He's actually been working on that.
We're doing
Good.
All right, thank you. All right, well, I just have a few updates since the last time we met a couple months ago. I think it was Kevin Wiseman that had
to look at this, start looking at the schedules. So I'm gonna share the kind of updated schedule with everybody here and kind of walk you through a little bit of that.
And when you do that, just point out, if you would, the deltas from the original schedule, because I've noticed that we're out a little bit further than we were last time. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So the good thing is that things are slowly moving forward. You know, we're continuing to see a lot of reviews of the designs that are coming in, right? We go 30%, 60%, 90%, and submitting it to the city and back and forth with the city on a lot of comments and permitting. So we've reached a kind of a pretty large milestone where we've swapped over the retail to MRG. So MRG is now here. They're now operating spaces. So they're operating the Desert Mart, Desert News. They're also operating the Desert Marketplace, which is the future La Palmas Oasis. And then they also have a kiosk and a wall in front of the future Uptown Essentials, the old CNBC store. So there's some construction walls, there's some things going on there. So it's good to see that going forward. We just had a big meeting this morning with Parodies and their construction team which is G4, that's going to start on the El Marisol demo and asbestos removal. So that's a big thing that we've been working on the last couple of months, is the asbestos remediation through the city. And so there's going to be a construction wall that's going up over the next few days down at El Marisol. And then we're starting asbestos remediation next week for the next few weeks. So that's a great step forward, starting to see some things happen. Just real quick, before we go into the schedule, on October 18th, from 11 to 2 at the Visitor Greater Palm Springs, there's going to be an MRG vendor outreach, where they're going to have local vendors come and you know, be able to display what they have available, and then MRG has a chance to add more local vendors to the stores. So we can definitely send out more information about that as we get a little bit closer. That's October 18th, 11 to 2 at Visitor Greater Palm Springs. So going into the schedule, you'll see, and it's kind of hard to see, some of us can see on the screen, but essentially the Las Palmas Oasis, we just talked about that in Uptown Essentials. And then really going forward, the Pink Door and iHeart PSP, the Pink Door is the new, it's going to be the new pre-security vending downstairs here. That has shifted, as well as the employee vending or not the employee, but the iHeart PSP vending upstairs Bono has shifted about a month or so. And that's really due to MRG trying to get their contractor on board. And unfortunately, they haven't had a whole lot of bidders. So that's caused a little bit of delay there. So although those aren't, you know, probably priority spots, we've kind of let them take a delay on that one. So it's probably about 30 days or so on those two. 9 Cities has also been pushed out about 30 days or so. They were just anticipating needing more time to construct than originally planned. And you'll see as we go through here, there's a little bit of minus and there's a little bit of plus. So there are a lot of minus too, if you look at it. When we get the Hey Joshua in motion, which are going to be taking over the 2 small stores up in the Bono for the Desert Mart and Desert News, we've had a lot of back and forth with MRG trying to massage what that schedule looked like. So you'll see Hey Joshua actually has moved up 5 months from its projected date. So that shows a completion in late February. But then if you look at, let's see, Hey Joshua, and then if you go to In Motion ended up shifting about 3 months. So the delta is actually, we got 2 months of that if you look at those 2 stores. So that's good news. If you go down to El Marisol and Cactus to Clouds, they've pretty much remained the same. El Marisol actually caught up a couple weeks, so it's projected to finish sooner than we had told everybody a couple months ago. If you go down to Las Palmas, Oasis and Uptown Essentials, they're each showing about a week later than what we had originally said a couple months ago. And again, a lot of things kind of change as they start to get their contractors on board and really nail down what the design looks like. And they run into, you know, issues here and there. And then we have the permitting and so many pieces of the puzzle that takes a lot of coordination. So some of these things kind of get massaged as we get closer and closer. And then the Coachella Valley, the duty-free part and the courtyard coffee, that was kind of something that has kind of been pushed a little bit because we were really working with MRG to really nail down their main stores, a lot of Palmas Oasis, Uptown Essentials, and the two small In Motion and Hey Joshua. So we really weren't focusing too much on those because those are, you know, just small kind of items, but those have pushed out a little bit. A couple months on each of those. And then Vino Bolo, if you remember from our discussions before, Vino Bolo and Trio really is not going to start construction until we open El Marisol. And so those, we have to wait for El Marisol to open before we close those restaurants down. And so they've actually caught up a couple weeks. They've moved those opening dates up a couple weeks from what we projected. So all in all, I mean, I think we're still looking pretty good. There's a little bit of give and take on some of the shops, but our aviation planner has been fantastic working with us, and Nikki is really our conduit from over at city planning, and it has taken a lot of coordination going on behind the scenes to keep everything moving and getting permitting going. We have a new building official over there that's been great to work with. And so we're building good relationships over across the street. And so everything's really good.
Questions? Todd, I can't remember if you were part of this discussion with Daniel or not, but I was flying through LaGuardia last week, and they've done a stunning job at redoing that airport. But the parts that are still under construction have all sorts of promotional things of here's what's coming, and pictures and renderings of what's happening. And I sent a note to Todd and also to Daniel to say, are we going to have that? And yes. And Daniel said yes. And you want to just tell us a little about that?
Sure. So we have one main wall that's kind of a little hard to explain, but it's as you go up the escalators, on the left-hand side is where the future Hakuna Empanadas is going to go. And it's right now a seating area on the left side. And that's where a lot of the construction materials are going to go in and out. There's going to be a construction wall that'll go along there up to where the new Las Palmas Oasis will be. And that wall has been designed with both MRG and Parodies getting together. And there'll be a really nice display of what's coming. And then our plan is to basically coming soon and kind of change the sticker to now open kind of thing as things start to open, and we can do a coming soon and now open display. So it'll be a really nice design display.
Do you plan to do something similar in the regional concourse?
No, there's not really a wall to do that there. Because there's going to be a wall up in front of the new 9 cities, and Parodies is planning to try to put something up there. But if you look at the Uptown Essentials, they have all their kiosks along there, so there's really not a chance to really do that there. But Parodies is going to try to do some more designs to their walls when they start putting the walls.
It's exciting stuff, and we should take credit and also give people a sense of it's coming and we're moving. Finally, we've been working on this for years, so more of that, the better. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to our next. Projects and capital improvements. Is that you, Harry?
That is me. And on the projects and capital improvements, this is all on paper. Feel free to ask questions about any of it. I'm not going to go through everything. I did want to highlight, though, that the outbound baggage handling system, we haven't touched on that much. We're still working behind the scenes to finish that, get that done and moving. We're expecting 30% designs on that next month. And that'll be the point where we'll really start to engage with the airlines, with TSA, so they can get their eyes on, hands on, tell us what works, what doesn't work. That project is going to lag the baggage claim project because of the delivery methods are different, and also because we wanted to make sure that we had enough cash on hand to be able to fund both projects. So with the outbound baggage handling system, we still have about a couple of years of, manual processing behind the scenes. But we're trying to make it as efficient as possible, as seamless as possible. We do have a 6 EDS machine, so that should help out a lot. I don't expect any baggage handling delays over the next couple of years while we work through this process. So that's the one thing I wanted to pick out of the capital projects. The only other thing on that report that I'd like to highlight is that the FIS study, the phase 1 of that has been completed. If you recall, it was broken into 2 phases as well, like the master plan. Phase 1 was being managed by the Greater Palm Springs, and that was really to gather case studies around FIS successful implementation of FIS in airports.
What's FIS?
Federal Inspection Station, sorry, for those of you who are not familiar with that. The FIS is essentially a facility for Customs and Border Protection to accommodate international air service. And so Intervistas has been working on that, has completed phase 1 of that. Visit Greater Palm Springs does have the executive summary as well as the case studies for that, and they're going through those now. We will be sitting down with Visit Greater Palm Springs to review those case studies. And once we've determined what makes sense, we'll be bringing that back to the commission to have a little bit of discussion about that before giving Intervistas the notice to proceed on phase 2 of that study, which will involve basically a business case specific to PSP for building an FIS as well as expanding international air service here at PSP. So those are the 2 things that I really wanted to call out. Are there any questions about that or the report in general?
When you do the feasibility study, is that in consideration of possible expansion? It's just sort of be a temporary situation given the current capacity and limitations.
We would love to see a temporary FIS built, and we're working behind the scenes to see if that's even feasible. The challenge there is apparently Customs and Border Protection really doesn't like temporary facilities. They like to see the permanent thing built. So that's going to be something we'll go back and forth with Customs on.
You should all know that this issue is probably one of the top priorities for the Greater Palm Springs Convention Group. They really think that expanding international service here could have a huge impact on overall tourism. So for Scott White and his team, this is a really important priority. And we talk about it in our working group in terms of long-term plan. It's something that I feel like moves to the top in terms of priorities. So you'll hear more about this and the importance that we think, or the impact we think it could have on local tourism by introducing international flights from here.
And Kevin, just to put my Visit Greater Palm Springs hat on, and the reason I sound so awful, I've just finished a 3-week tour where we were in the UK, Ireland, Scotland, really sharing what this wonderful destination has to offer. So we literally took it on the road to the #1 destinations that we think we could handle sort of day one. So it definitely aligns with what you were saying, and it is a top priority. And we were well received. So that's very exciting.
Saw your pictures, they look great. Okay, Eric, moving on.
Moving on. So that's with the projects report. Shall I move to the executive director?
Please.
All right. With the executive director report, a couple of things I wanted to highlight here as well. So the first thing is earlier this year, TSA mandated that all commercial airports nationally come up with an insider threat employee screening system. They didn't really provide guidelines for it. They just said, you're going to screen employees now. And so we've been spinning our wheels for months with TSA, like the other airports, trying to figure out how to implement that, working through liability issues and how it's going to be funded and what are the rules and regulations and what equipment can be used and things of that nature. And we still don't really have any more answers than when we started. However, TSA mandated that we implement this by the 25th of September, so a few days from now. So we, over the last month, have been doing this mad dash to figure out how to implement this thing. We ended up having to declare an emergency. The city manager declared an emergency, just procure the services of Allied Universal, which is a security firm, so that they can conduct an employee screening on the airport. So they'll be starting those services here over the next week. We had meetings with them just today so they can get familiar with the facility. But I wanted to bring that to your attention because it is a $267,000 a year hit to the budget, at least for now. That's probably going to grow. We have been not only working with regional TSA, but I sent a letter to the TSA administrator expressing our concern about how this is being done and how it's being implemented. And all I can say on that is more to come, but we're massaging those numbers with the airlines to try and figure out how to get it paid for. So that's the first thing. Are there any questions on aviation worker screening? No? Okay. The next thing is our staffing. I do have positive news. We do have an HR specialist on staff. She started 3 weeks ago. Her name is Paola. She's been working very diligently to start to fill some of our positions, not only from the last fiscal year, but from this fiscal year. So I've been working with her almost on a daily basis to try and make sure she understands priorities, what needs we have. We've been getting positions filled pretty rapidly here. We've already promoted 3 fire captains. We've got operations specialists filled just this week, 4 positions there. Our maintenance technicians are being advertised. The big one for me is the deputy director of capital development. That position is open right now. So we're working through this as quickly as possible, staffing up as quickly as possible, while certainly making sure that we have the space and the time to onboard people properly. But that was a huge win for us and for this group because this group advocated for an HR specialist. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And I don't think I have anything else on the executive director report, but do you have any questions for me?
Questions? We good on Zoom? Thank you, Harry. Commissioners' requests and reports. Any requests from commissioners? Anything that you'd like to propose or any reports you're looking for? Anything here? Only request I would make is that before our next meeting, think about our Measure J funds. I'd ask your friends, do some research. What are things we could do? How can we use those funds to really improve service? So if you can give that some thought, that would be a request. Now we go to city council actions. Anything to say?
I have nothing for city council actions.
Okay. I'd like to give you reports. Those are all in the packet. Any questions on that? Okay, when is our future meeting? Our next one? Christina?
The next commission meeting
Yes.
is October 18th.
October 18th. Okay, that's everyone's calendar. Also, you'll notice that we spent some time assigning all the commissioners, including the new commissioners, to the subcommittees. And so the chairs, Todd in marketing, and David is in operations. We don't have a chair for budget, but we're going to work on that. Kevin Weissman is the chair of the noise committee, and I'm the chair of the ad hoc design. Ad hoc design is the group that is working with the concessions team. That's different than the working group, which is working with the long-term plan. So as these groups meet, Christina and team will alert you to some of the subcommittee meetings, and we'll make sure everybody's involved. I think we covered almost everybody, and there have been a couple last-minute changes to this, but we'll start here and see what you think, especially those that are new, and look forward to your contribution on those as well.
I just want to make one note that Commissioner Keith Young has volunteered to join the Budget and Finance Committee. So we still have 1 vacancy to fill. So if anyone would like to join the Budget and Finance Committee, we'd love to fill that vacancy. So let me know, please.
Please.
Thank you.
All right. Harry, anything else?
Nothing else.
Christina, we're good?
We're good.
All right. Any other questions, comments? We ready to adjourn? I just need a motion.
Move adjourned.
Okay. Second. All right, good. Thank you all for your time. Thanks for your commitment. We'll see you in October. Thank you all.
Have a good evening.
Everybody.
Thanks, Christina.